Good afternoon and good morning. Welcome back to the Charlie Mike webinar series hosted by the National Veteran Small Business Coalition. Thank you all for joining us today. Again, we'd like to thank our 4 sponsors who made this webinar series possible. Today's webinar is 1 hour and is being recorded. A link to the recording will be posted on the NVSBC Charlie Mike webpage. If you have any questions during this presentation, please type them on the text box on the right hand of your screen. If you can't get to your question in time, we will get the answer and email the answers to you. I'd like to welcome back our fearless leader, the Executive Director for the National Veteran Small Business Coalition, Mr. Scott Jensen.
Thanks, Earl. It's great to be with you all. Thanks for everyone who's joining. It's great to be back with you all. And Earl, as always, thanks so much for your hard work and dedication in getting this series put together and over the last several months of making sure it was delivered professionally and appropriately. We always appreciate the hard work that you do. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Stephanie Sherwood, who serves as the Corporate Small Business Program Manager and Small Business Liaison Officer for Weston Solutions, Inc. She has over 30 years of procurement and federal small business program experience. Stephanie began her federal procurement career as a subcontract administrator at the Idaho National Laboratory, continued her career in Honolulu, Hawaii, developing contracts, procurement procedures, and vendor management guidelines for American Savings Bank. And Stephanie oversaw the bank's vendor management program and ensured compliance with U.S. Department of Treasury Office of Supervision. In 2005, Stephanie began her employment with Weston Solutions, and since 2007 has managed Weston small business programs and serves as their small business liaison officer. Weston Small Business Program encompasses contracts for federal defense and civilian agencies, in addition to state and local government, municipal, and commercial clients. Stephanie develops and manages subcontracting plans with aggressive utilization goals for all socioeconomic categories of small business concerns. Stephanie considers her role at Weston to be twofold. First, to assist program managers and subcontract managers with strategic sourcing, supplier development, and teaming opportunities with qualified small business firms, while further ensuring compliance and subcontracting goal attainment. And second, to serve a small business community through outreach and networking, one-on-one counseling and mentoring assistance, as demonstrated with her support of our program today. Stephanie's been a member of NCMA since 1991 and is a member of the Society of American Military Engineers, the SAME's Philadelphia Post Small Business Committee, the Chester County Workforce Development Board, Alpha Kappa Phi Professional Business Fraternity, Delta Epsilon chapter, and presently serves as the Pennsylvania representative for the DoD Mid-Atlantic Regional Council for Small Business Advocacy. Aside from her career, and we were just discussing this, Stephanie is a dedicated preservation breeder of Hungarian Vizslas and enjoys training and competing with her dogs at conformation and field events. Stephanie, thanks so much for being here with us today. We appreciate having you here. It's always great to see you, and I'll turn it over to you, and we look forward to hearing from you today.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to y'all today, and especially about the topic of small business participation plans. There's a lot of confusion and frustration behind why they're important and the difference between a participation plan and a subcontracting plan. So I'm going to go through some of those things as they pertain to small business prime offerors. So anything that's associated with and other than small business, I'm not going to cover. I'd be happy to discuss with anybody who's interested in that information afterwards, but for this presentation, I'm just going to review what's applicable for a small business prime offeror when you are bidding on an unrestricted opportunity that is primarily a DoD opportunity. You'll see small business participation commitment plans required of all offerors. So there's certain things that you need to be aware of and take advantage of, because as a small business, you're one step ahead of those of us that are bidding on behalf of an other than small business. So next slide, we'll jump right into what I just mentioned, that a small business participation plan is not the same as a subcontracting plan. So for DoD acquisitions, other than those that are awarded based on low price technically acceptable, the extent of participation of small businesses in the performance of the contract is addressed during source selection. And the extent of participation by small businesses is evaluated along with other proposal criteria. So all offerors, both other than small as well as small, are required to commit a level of small business participation that's based on the total contract value. Sometimes when bidding MATOCs or IDIQs, the client will establish the full contract capacity and say base your participation on the full contract capacity or a percentage thereof. It's usually defined. Or if it's a case where you're doing a C-type contract where you're bidding a project and you have a firm fixed price that you are proposing, it's based on your total bid price or total contract price. So only other than small business offerors are required to include a small business subcontracting plan that's consistent with the commitments of the small business participation plan. So as a small business, you're just concerned with addressing the requirements that pertain to small business participation. Next slide. So here's a summary comparison of what's required from small and other than small. So you must propose how small businesses will participate as a percentage of the total contract value. Yes, that's required from both small and other than small. Is your self-performance included as part of the small business participation? Yes, as a small business prime, that's definitely a major consideration there, and it puts you leaps and bounds ahead of your other than small business offerers, because as you are well aware, as a large business offeror, your self-performance actually counts against your small business participation because you're really relying on your subcontracting to realize your small business participation commitment goals. And then must submit a small business subcontracting plan consistent with your small business participation. As a small business offeror, no, you don't have to worry about a subcontracting plan, but other than small businesses, yes, and we need to ensure that those subcontracting plans meet the same commitments in the participation commitment. Next slide. So how are these small business participation plans evaluated? There's actually very specific criterions outlined in the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. There's procedures, guidance, and information, section 215.304. You can put that into your search bar, Google search it, and it'll pull up this exact text. So the evaluation factors may include, and it says may, so there might be additional requirements that the client may specify, something more specific about, give us an example of something you did to work previously with small businesses, but by and large, these 6 criterions are the meat of what goes into your participation plan. So you want to have the extent of, or the evaluation criterion of the extent of which such firms are specifically identified in proposals. So are you identifying by name the firms that you plan to use or you plan to have participate in the performance of the work? The extent of commitment to use those firms. So do you have enforceable commitments? Are they verbal commitments? Have you just done sourcing and found firms that appear to be competent and responsible? Those would be non-enforceable. Enforceable commitments are weighted far more heavily than non-enforceable ones. Third is the complexity and variety of work that small firms are going to perform. So you have your self-performance and you have your anticipated subcontracting needs. Break it out by scope elements and get down into those niche areas and identify if you have small businesses that you plan to use for those services or goods, products, rentals, anything. List them in your participation plan. The realism of the proposal, and I'll get into detail on that later. That one's a little subjective there. So convincing your client that you can realistically achieve those commitments that you propose. So keep that in mind when you're making those commitments, that you're going to be expected to meet those commitments. Your past performance of the offerors in complying, now in this case too, your compliance with 52219-8, that applies to all offerors. we're all expected to prioritize opportunities to work with small businesses under federally funded programs. So that's large businesses as well as small businesses. And then 52219-9 does not apply to small businesses. Past performance in complying with your small business subcontracting plan. As a small business, you don't have to comply with a subcontracting plan. And then lastly, the extent of participation of those firms, small businesses, in terms of the value of the total acquisition. So that's really the quantitative part of your participation commitment. So again, just a little note, other than small business offerors, achieve their small business participation through subcontracting. Small business prime offerors achieve small business participation through their participation as a prime without having to subcontract, or in addition to your subcontracting. So you can have self-performance alone, or you can have self-performance plus additional team subs, joint venture partners, mentor-protege partners, or pre-qualified subcontractors that you plan to use for subbing. Next slide. Okay, so let's go through each section specifically and see what's the best way to present this information for your participation plan. So the extent to which small businesses are specifically identified in the proposal. So this is where you're going to be calling out who's responsible for what in the performance of your contract. So you would identify your firm as a small business prime. You'd identify any teaming partners that are also small businesses, and then identify any additional small businesses that you plan to, say, solicit for any subcontracting or procurement needs that you anticipate are going to be required in order to perform the full requirements under the scope of work. Be sure to identify any and all socioeconomic categories that you fulfill as a prime, as well as those that your teaming partners and planned small business subcontractors that you may solicit for support. If they fulfill multiple categories, you want to make sure you cover all of those categories, because the broader, the depth and breadth that you offer in terms of small business participation is going to be weighted a little more heavily than saying, oh, we are a small business prime, we're small business only, and we're going to do, say, 25% of the contract. Then that's the extent of your small business participation if you're planning on not subcontracting any further work to small businesses. So keep that in mind. All right, next slide. The extent of the commitment to use small businesses. So this is where we're talking about enforceable commitments. If you propose a small business participation in addition to your as a prime, sorry, I have somebody calling me. Okay, that took care of that. Pardon I didn't put my do not disturb up, so I apologize. So if you propose small business participation in addition to your self-performance as a prime, you'll need to describe the extent of that commitment. So consider including enforceable commitments for small business participation beyond your self-performance. So since enforceable commitments are weighted more heavily than non-enforceable ones, it makes sense that if you can get a written agreement put in place, that's going to weigh more heavily than a verbal agreement, or like I said, just listing subs that maybe you've used in the past and you may or may not use moving forward on this contract. So some examples of enforceable commitments that are dually signed commitments, and that's a factor that I was recently made aware of, that, you know, having a sub say, you know, send you, say, a letter of commitment that says, we agree to support you, you know, if you're using our pricing in your proposal, that if you win the contract, we will support you on this project. That if a sub sends you a letter of commitment along those lines, that you need to have it dually signed. So whoever received that letter on behalf of your company, either your procurement person or representative from your firm, your sales director or something, they should also sign to acknowledge that that enforceable commitment has been acknowledged by both parties. Teaming agreements typically are dually signed. You know, when you send a teaming agreement out to a teaming partner or a key subcontractor, it's usually issued on behalf of whomever is in charge, the program manager that's in charge of your project here at your own company as the prime. So teaming agreements, generally speaking, should be dually signed as well. Joint venture agreements, if you're part of a joint venture, that too will have dual signatures on it. And the same thing for mentor-protege agreements. If you are in a mentor-protege relationship where you are a mentor and you have a small business that is your protege, your mentor-protege agreement has a requirement in it that the mentor will provide subcontracting opportunities to its designated protege. So your mentor-protege agreement serves as an enforceable commitment, because if there's opportunities for your protege to support you on this contract, you should certainly be considering them. And, and there may or may not be. It might be an open-ended IDIQ or MATOC where you have to bid task orders. But certainly consider, if you are in a mentor-protege and you're mentoring another small business, to include that mentor-protege agreement that states that you are mentoring this firm, and that will serve as a enforceable commitment under your participation commitment plan. Okay, next slide. The complexity and variety of work small businesses will perform. This is best presented in a tabular format. So I've seen different variations of this type of table, and I basically chose the one that was most specific, because this covers some of the agencies don't necessarily care if you include the CAGE code for your teaming partners or subcontractors or designated small businesses. Some do. By including the CAGE code, you are verifying that that's the firm you're going to use, and your client can look up the CAGE code and then cross-check to see, is this firm in fact small by the NAICS code you're listing for what you intend to procure from them or have them perform as part of the scope of work. So you would list yourself as the prime offeror, the NAICS code for the work that you are going to self-perform on the contract. And again, if there's multiple NAICS codes, it's fine, list multiple codes and list the multiple types of services that you intend to supply. If you have large businesses on your team, you should list them. I mean, I'm all about full disclosure. Even though it's a small business participation commitment, I think it serves the client well to see, here's the types of goods and services, supplies, and by NAICS code that we intend for small businesses. And then it also identifies up front that there's certain areas of the scope that you have identified are only available from large businesses, or perhaps you're in a mentor-protege relationship yourself and your mentor is behind you, supporting you on this contract. That's also good information to include there, that you're using a large business because they are in fact your mentor, and that makes sense for you to be teamed together. But list them out by category, multiple firms in each category, however it's best presented, so that you can show which firms are small, which ones are disadvantaged, woman-owned. And again, if you have a firm that qualifies, say you have you as the prime offeror or a service-disabled vet, you would list yourself up front as the prime offeror. But if you have a hub that is also a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, you can list them in the small business category as well as the veteran category and the service-disabled veteran category. It's fine to have them listed multiple times. It shows that you've got adequate depth and breadth of different types of services from different types of firms. And if you have firms that are under enforceable commitments, again, you want to draw some attention to that. And I've found that putting them in a different font or italics or something to call them out, and then just put a note under the table that the firms that are listed in bold font are firms for which we have enforceable commitments. And then you're going to attach your enforceable commitments in addition to your participation commitments. So at the end of the document, you'll include your enforceable commitments in there. So everything should match up. If you say a firm is under enforceable commitment, then you should provide that commitment along with your participation commitment plan. But definitely call them out. If you're including firms that say you've included in solicitations and you may or may not use them moving forward, I would just list those firms individually and include a statement that the firms that populate this table are those with which we've worked with previously, or those which have responded to our solicitations for support services that we need to identify for proposal purposes. But if you have firms that are under enforceable commitments, then highlight those and put them in bold or italics so they stand out, so that your client can see that you do indeed have enforceable commitments, and you should get credit for that. Okay, next slide. This is the one that kind of throws a monkey wrench into it, because it really is subjective regarding the realism of the proposed small business participation. as a small business, you won't have past performance in utilizing small business in most cases for, say, subcontracting purposes. You won't have readily available individual subcontracting reports, summary subcontracting reports, readily handy data that says you are able to meet these goals because you've met goals in the past. But if you have a means of gathering that information, say through your project controls or even through your invoicing processes to see if you've worked on previous similar projects and you've used small businesses, and you can say this is how we came up with our goal of 5% for SDB, because typically we tend to subcontract that amount of work to small disadvantaged businesses. That's good information to include in your narrative regarding how that level of small business participation is determined to be achievable. So they really want to see, how did you come up with your goals? Your procuring agencies typically will list an overall small business target that they'd like to see achieved or exceeded. Usually it's anywhere from 20 to even upwards of 40% of the contract value in an unrestricted procurement. But I would not recommend basing your overall small business participation just on that goal, because if you really feel like you can't meet it, you're setting yourself up for, once you say you're going to meet that goal, you're going to be expected to meet it. So don't use that as your sole basis for setting your overall small business commitment. Your self-performance and participation as a prime, definitely, that's your starting point. So if you say the client says they want to see no less than 30% of the contract value be reserved for small business participation, if you know you as the prime are going to be able to do 35, 40% of the contract yourselves, then you've already exceeded that goal. So you're in great shape there. So then you're looking into anything additional that your teaming partners or subcontractors are going to bring to the table, perhaps those socioeconomic subset goals. So any additional participation by your small business teaming partners, and then base it on your anticipated procurements for services and products that you planned for small business participation. Those are things above and beyond what your teaming partners might be providing. So if you think you're going to need laboratory services, or even things like porta potty rentals, temporary fencing, small niche type requirements, those are perfect for small business participation. And finding small businesses that provide those types of services is usually pretty easily facilitated via the SBA's Dynamic Small Business Search Network. The VA has a really nice searchable database as well. The EPA, there's numerous government approved databases out there that you can find good, solid, qualifying small businesses. So again, that's part of your market research, is doing your sourcing, finding out how are there available small businesses out there, where are they located, are they capable and competent to support you on this type of acquisition, part of your market research, and then actually doing sourcing and outreach to identify qualified small businesses. Attending SAME events sponsored by National Veteran Small Business Coalition, National Women's Business Network. There's many organizations that hold outreach events for you to identify potential small business subcontractors and partners. And then again, your past performance using small businesses on similar contract scopes of work. Again, not as easily available to you. You might have to do some number crunching or reach back to some of your accounting departments or project controls groups if you have those available to see on if you've done previous, you obviously have past performance to reach back to. Did you work with small businesses and in what capacity? And any information you can find that shows that yes, you've used small businesses as teaming partners or subcontractors in the past, and that you are developing your approach and your goals for this particular contract based on what you've known to be successful for you in the past, will only help to bolster the realism of your proposal. Okay, next slide. Past performance. While we're on the subject of past performance, all offers are expected to have past performance complying with the requirements of 52-219-8. Again, that's the section of the FAR that pertains to utilization of small business concerns. Small business offerors, again, are not required to address 52-219-9 because that's subcontracting plans, but the other section 219-8 pertains to just overall utilization of small businesses. If you happen to have a corporate policy statement or procedures that prioritize small business subcontracting or even small business utilization, I would include that information in your participation commitment plan. Present any prior contracts or subcontracts where you use small businesses as teaming partners and subcontractors. So similar to what I just spoke to, if you can present the quantitative value of that small business utilization in terms of percentages and dollars subcontracted to small businesses under similar contracts you've performed in the past, definitely do so. But if you haven't had past performance and actually hands-on subcontracting with small businesses, that's fine. As a small business, it's not expected of you to have that level of information available to present for past performance. But you are expected, for any contract you enter into, to prioritize the attempts to engage small businesses to help you with that work. So include any procedures that you have to ensure timely payments to small businesses. So even just mentioning that you have an approved accounting system. If you do have an approved accounting system, I know for small businesses that's not necessarily a requirement to have a DCAA approved accounting system. But if you have any examples where you helped another small business and went above and beyond to help expedite payments to them, process their invoices more timely, this too is in more recent years, I've seen this as a more heavily weighted factor, that if there's anything you can do to ensure that you will pay your subcontractors on time, particularly your small business subcontractors, definitely mention that in your proposal, that you agree to prioritize any assistance you can offer for facilitating timely payments to small business. We all want to get paid when we do our job well, and getting paid on time is definitely important, particularly for our small business partners. Okay, next section. So the extent of participation of small businesses in terms of the total value of the acquisition. This is where your 8th grade math skills will be tested here, because most DoD RFPs will include minimum quantitative value for small business participation that's required of all offerors. So you typically get that overall small business participation must be no less than, say, 20 to 30% of the contract value. And that's where your level of self-performance as the prime will be your minimum proposed small business participation. Any participation by your teaming partners and subs is added to that level of self-performance. So you need to try to carve out, if you have a teaming partner that, say, is going to be responsible for a certain piece of scope, you have to try to do your best guess estimating of what do you think that percentage is going to be of the total contract value. And again, be conservative about it and not overreach, because if you think your teaming partner that, say, is a small disadvantaged business, that what they're responsible for might be 5 or 6% of the contract value, try to err on the conservative side and keep it at maybe 5%, because you don't want to overextend your goals, because again, once you commit to those, they are a commitment and they do become enforceable under the performance of the contract, and you will be expected to meet those goals. But you also want to consider subset socioeconomic categories that you and your SB subcontractors fulfill. You will typically see subset categorical goals proposed by the agency in addition to that overall small business target. Now, the evaluation criteria generally hovers around the overall small business. Did you meet or exceed the government's planned target for small business participation? And then mention something along the lines of, for the socioeconomic goals, did you meet or exceed maybe one or more of the subset categorical goals? And typically that's not difficult to do, depending on what's your socioeconomic status as a prime. So if you are a service disabled veteran-owned small business and you're going to do 30% of the contract value, right there your service disabled veteran-owned small business target is going to be 30%. or more if you have subs or teaming partners that are also of that category. Okay, next slide. So here's a quick comparison to how an other than small business offer is compared to a small business offer. So in this example, the procuring agency has a minimum small business participation goal of 20% of the contract value. Your other than small business prime or large business prime proposes 25% participation by small businesses via their subcontracting, and they're going to self-perform 70% of the contract with an additional 5% subcontracting to other than small businesses, so other large businesses. While you, as a small business prime, are proposing only 5% planned subcontracting to small businesses, but you're going to self-perform 25% of the contract value, with 70% of your subcontracting going to other than small businesses. From first glance, it might look as though your large business has a much better proposal than the small business does, but in all reality, your small business prime will receive a higher rating on this evaluation because your percentage of work you self-perform is included as part of that small business participation because you're a small business. So the other than small business prime's total participation is still only 25% of the contract value because they've only reserved 25% of their subcontracting for small businesses. While you, as a small business prime, your overall small business participation is now 30% because your self-performance of 25% added to your 5% subcontracting equals 30%. So you're going to get a higher evaluation score because of that factor alone, that you as a small business, right out the gate, you've got self-performance that counts, and then anything that you subcontract is just icing on the cake. So you're in a good position to get a good score on your small business participation. So how do you present this? Let's move on to the next slide. So you want to present your total combined percentage of work to be performed by both other than small business and small business. And then you include the work performed by both prime and subcontractors. So in this example, if the prime proposes a total price for the contract of $1 million, or say it's a fixed multiple award contract that's $1 million value, including all the options. That's the total contract capacity is $1 million. Small businesses are expected to provide $300,000 in services and supplies as a prime, or through subcontracting, or a combination of both. And then your percentage planned for small businesses is 30%. And then the remaining 70% is other than small. So the total is 100%. So they want to make sure that whatever you propose totals up to 100% of the contract value. And this seems very elementary, but it just, you have to remember that your self-performance is included in that total planned for SBs. So you list it out in a tabular format. Total percentage planned for other than small or large business is 70%. And then the total planned for small business is 30%. I always include some clarification that if wherever you're including yourself. So when I prepare these as a large business, when I present the total percentage planned for other than small, I'll put my little asterisks up there and make sure at the bottom that I identify that includes my self-performance as a large business in the OTSB. So in this case, you're putting the clarification after the small business percentage that includes your self-performance as a small business prime offeror. So when you total everything up and combine it, OTSB and SB has to equal 100%. So everything totals up to $1 million. So again, another little note here that when you propose on a MATOC, the procuring agency typically provides a total contract value on which you're supposed to base your participation commitment. And it's usually the full capacity of the contract. If it's not provided, definitely ask the agency to either provide the total contract value against which they want you to base your participation commitment, or ask them if there's another value. Basically, if they don't provide a value, they need to provide you a fixed value. Otherwise, you can't run these calculations and present meaningful dollar amounts. You're basing it on, an imaginary number. So if they don't provide you with a value to propose as the total contract value, and it's not a contract where you are presenting your total fixed price, then you need to ask that question of your procuring agency. If it's a, say, a construction project and you're coming up with your own firm fixed price, then you're going to base that 100% is going to match up to whatever your total contract value is. So make sure that whatever you have on that 100% line, that dollar amount matches whatever your total proposal price is, if it's that type of contract where you're bidding a firm fixed price. But if it's a MATOC, IDIQ, and they're saying it's a $50 million capacity, I would check with the contracting officer and ask the question during the Q&A period of, do you want us to base our small business participation on the full contract capacity? And they'll let you know what the value is to base it on. Okay, next slide. So presenting those minimum quantitative values of small business participation across the socioeconomic categories. I did not include dollar values in this table. However, in most of the participation plans, they'll ask for you to also put the corresponding dollar values in here. But for this example, I didn't bother breaking it out based on a particular dollar value. But in this example, you want to present the total percentage of participation performed by small businesses and each subset category of small business. So the percentage of work performed by small businesses that qualify in multiple categories, you need to include them in each individual category. So here's my Warner Brothers tribute for the Roadrunner series. So you have Acme Corporation is the small business prime, and they're going to perform 25% of the contracted value. Roadrunner Inc. is one of their team subs, and it's a woman-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned small business, and they are estimated to perform 2% of the contract value. And then Coyote Contracting is their other team sub, who is small disadvantaged, woman-owned, and also hub zone. And they're going to perform 3% of the contract value. So based on the categorization of you as the prime, Acme Corporation, and your two team subs, Roadrunner and Coyote, you are proposing 30% overall small business, because you're taking your prime as 25%, and then you've got 2% coming from Roadrunner and 3% coming from Coyote. So you're going to add those together, and that's where you get your total participation of 30% for across all subsets of small business. Now for small disadvantaged, you've got 3% because Coyote Contracting is your only team sub that satisfies the small disadvantaged category. For woman-owned small business, you've got 5% because both Coyote and Roadrunner are woman-owned small businesses. So you've got your 2% by one, 3% by the other. Add them together, you got 5% for that category. For Hub Zone, you've got the performance of Coyote, they're 3%. And then for veteran and service disabled veteran, you can include Roadrunner's performance at 2% for both of those categories. So again, whatever category they fulfill, you add in their percentage of participation for those particular subset categories to make sure you cover all your bases. So ideally, it's nice to have firms that fulfill multiple categories for multiple targets, but in some cases you may not have a sub that, say, is a hub zone small business. If you don't have a means of meeting if the government proposes their goals and says, we would like to see no less than 2% hub zone participation. If you have no means of meeting a 2% hub zone goal, you're not a hub zone firm, you have no plan subcontracting for hub zone firms, do not propose a hub zone participation target, because you will be expected to meet that goal once you set it. So it's okay to have a 0% goal. I know we're all discouraged from proposing 0% goals, but in this type of scenario, don't propose a goal that you have no way of getting there, no way of meeting it. But you would need to provide some explanation for that and explain to in your proposal that You propose 0% hub zone utilization because you don't have any availability or any planned subcontracting for hub zone firms based on past performance, your marketing, your outreach, et cetera, et cetera. And having goals fulfilled in other subset categories will more than compensate for, a deficiency in one of the other subset categories. You're really looking at the total small business participation to carry the weight behind your proposal. Okay, so that covers the major requirements that address the evaluation criteria from the DFARS. So I have a few, just closing next slide, I have a few additional tips and considerations. So reps and certs, very, very important, because when you are listing small business teaming partners and subcontractors and suppliers in your table by name, you want to make sure that that particular firm is a small business according to the NAICS code's size standard that corresponds to the type of goods or services that they're going to perform or provide for you. So easy reference, check the firm, make sure you've checked their reps and certs in sam.gov. Are they in fact small, woman-owned, et cetera, et cetera. And your team, if you have an enforceable commitment like a teaming agreement, those are usually contents in your teaming agreement. And anybody afterwards, if you want to see examples of that type of information, how we set up a teaming agreement, I can share that information to you individually afterwards. But just verify that your small business partners are in fact small. Weston works with a number of small businesses that I jokingly refer to them as our other large businesses that are only small in one NAICS code category, and it's usually environmental remediation services. It's an employee-based size standard. But I caution my project managers and program managers that if you use that firm for, say, consulting services or engineering services, we have to claim them as a large business because they are not a small business according to the reps and certs under the size standard that corresponds to the NAICS codes for those services. They're only small for remediation.
Earl, it looks like we may have lost Stephanie. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great.
Let me see if I can get a hold of her.
We knew Stephanie was having some storm conditions in the Philadelphia area where she lives. Thankfully, we've made it all the way through her presentation, and we're down to just some last few additional tips and considerations. But the next slide would have been questions. We had a couple that we will get responded to, and we will let Stephanie know how much everyone appreciated the presentation. We did get a comment from Diane Dempsey. Thank you, Diane. It was a great presentation, and hope you're doing well as well. Here is Stephanie's contact information, and we will let her know that we closed out here. And if you have any other information or questions that you have for her, please feel free to reach out to her. Again, thank you for your participation with us today. Earl, once again, thank you so much for all the work you do for all of us at NVSBC and your stewardship of this great series of webinars. We wish you all a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you very soon. Thank you now.
All right, take care, everybody.